The Loaf of Bread and the Letter. Chapter 1. The Breaking Point. Michael Davis shivered as he pulled his threadbare jacket tighter around his bony shoulders. December in Philadelphia was unforgiving, and the bitter wind that whistled through the downtown streets cut straight to his core. 6 months unemployed, 3 months homeless, and now 2 days without food. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted from Harrison's bakery, its warm golden light spilling onto the darkening sidewalk. Michael stood outside, watching through the frosted windows as customers left with brown paper bags, their contents still steaming in the cold air. His stomach clenched painfully, a persistent reminder of his desperate situation. "Just one more day," he whispered to himself, his breath forming small clouds that dissipated into the twilight. "Something will change tomorrow." But he had been telling himself the same thing for weeks now. Tomorrow never brought the job he'd been desperately searching for since the factory closed. Tomorrow never brought back the apartment he couldn't afford after his savings ran dry. Tomorrow never filled his empty stomach. Michael watched as the last customer left the bakery. Mr. Harrison, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and rounded glasses, began his closing routine. Through the window, Michael could see shelves still lined with bread and pastries, food that would likely be thrown away by morning. The thought made something snap inside him. His hands trembled, not just from the cold now, but from the weight of the decision forming in his mind. He had never stolen anything in his life. Even at his lowest points, he had maintained that last shred of dignity, but dignity wouldn't keep him alive much longer. "God forgive me," he murmured, pushing open the door. The little bell above jingled cheerfully, announcing his presence. Mr. Harrison looked up with a kind smile. "Just in time. I was about to lock up. What can I get for you?" Michael's throat went dry. He hadn't thought this through. His eyes darted nervously around the store, landing on a large sourdough loaf on the middle shelf. "Are you all right, son?" Mr. Harrison asked, concern etching lines around his eyes. The moment stretched between them. Then, in one desperate motion, Michael lunged forward, grabbed the bread, and bolted toward the door. "Hey!" Mr. Harrison called out, surprisingly agile as he moved around the counter. Michael's hand was on the door handle when he felt a firm grip on his shoulder. He froze, the bread clutched to his chest, shame burning hotter than any hunger pangs. Chapter 2. Unexpected Grace. "Please," Michael whispered, not turning around. "I haven't eaten in 2 days." The hand on his shoulder didn't tighten or pull him back. Instead, it gently turned him around. Mr. Harrison's face showed neither anger nor fear, but something Michael hadn't seen directed at him in months: compassion. "Come sit down," Mr. Harrison said softly, gesturing to a small table in the corner of the bakery. Confused and wary, Michael followed him, still clutching the bread. His legs felt weak as he sank into the chair, preparing himself for the inevitable call to the police. But Mr. Harrison didn't reach for the phone. Instead, he disappeared into the back room, returning moments later with a steaming bowl of soup and a plate with butter and cheese. "Eat," he said simply, placing the food in front of Michael. "No one should go hungry in this city, not when I have bread on my shelves." Tears welled in Michael's eyes as he stared at the food. "I was going to steal from you," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Mr. Harrison sat down across from him. "Yet you didn't run when I caught you. That tells me something about who you really are." He pushed the soup closer. "Now eat before it gets cold." Michael ate slowly at first, then with growing urgency as his body responded to the nourishment. The soup was hearty, a homemade vegetable with chunks of potato and carrot. The bread, now properly sliced and buttered, tasted better than anything he could remember. As Michael ate, Mr. Harrison quietly asked questions, not invasive or judgmental, but genuinely interested in Michael's story. How he'd worked at the steel mill for 15 years before it closed down, how he'd searched for work every day since then, how the economy had left thousands like him stranded without safety nets, how his wife had left 6 months ago, taking their daughter to stay with her parents because she couldn't bear to watch them all sink into poverty. "What's your trade?" Mr. Harrison asked when Michael finished eating. Machinery maintenance mostly, but I've done all kinds of work. I'm willing to do anything. There was a pleading note in his voice. Mr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Then he stood and walked to the register. Michael tensed, expecting him to call the authorities now that he had shown kindness. Instead, Mr. Harrison returned with a paper bag containing several more loaves of bread, some pastries, and a small book. "Take these," he said, placing the bag in Michael's hands. "The food should last you a few days, and this," he tapped the small book with his finger, "this helped me when I was where you are now." Michael looked down at the book. The Promises of God was printed in simple gold lettering on the cover. "I'm not asking you to believe," Mr. Harrison said. "Just read it. Sometimes the words we need find us at the right moment." "Why are you helping me?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible. Mr. Harrison's eyes grew distant. 25 years ago, I was you. Different city, same desperation. Someone showed me mercy when they could have shown me handcuffs. I promised myself I'd pass that mercy forward if I ever had the chance. He pressed something else into Michael's hand, a business card. "Come back on Monday morning at 5 a.m. if you want work. It's not easy, and it's not glamorous, but it's honest, and it pays." Chapter 3. The Long Night. That night, huddled in the relative warmth of the downtown bus terminal, Michael ate sparingly of the bread, saving most for the days ahead. The security guard, who usually kicked him out, looked the other way after Michael shared one of the pastries with him. Once his immediate hunger was satisfied, Michael pulled out the small book Mr. Harrison had given him. He had never been particularly religious. His mother had taken him to church as a child, but those memories had faded long ago, replaced by the harsh realities of adult life and the growing conviction that if there was a God, he had forgotten about people like Michael. Yet something about Mr. Harrison's kindness had cracked open a door Michael thought long sealed. With nowhere else to go and nothing else to do in the quiet hours of the night, he began to read. The book was simple, passages of scripture interwoven with stories of people who had found hope in their darkest moments. No prosperity promises or easy answers, just honest wrestling with suffering and glimpses of light in the darkness. One passage in particular caught his attention. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Michael read it again and again, the words seeming to speak directly to his situation. Not a promise that everything would magically become better, but a reminder that even in his current circumstances, there could be purpose and meaning. As the night deepened and the terminal grew quieter, Michael continued reading, occasionally pausing to think about what he'd read. The stories resonated with him, people who had lost everything but somehow found the strength to start again, people who had discovered that their lowest point wasn't the end of their story. By the time dawn broke over Philadelphia, casting long shadows across the terminal floor, Michael had read the entire book. His eyes were tired, but something inside him felt different. A tiny spark of hope had been kindled where before there had been only resignation and despair. Monday was 2 days away. For the first time in months, Michael found himself looking forward to something, planning for it. He would find somewhere to clean up, maybe see if the community center had shower facilities. He would need to be presentable, reliable. He tucked the book carefully into his jacket pocket, next to his heart. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't forget this night, this moment when his story could have gone one way but instead went another. Chapter 4. First Steps. Monday morning arrived with a crystalline clarity that only winter can bring. Michael had been awake long before the 4 a.m. alarm on his battered watch. He had spent Sunday at the community center, where he'd washed his clothes, showered, and even managed to get a volunteer to give him a haircut. His reflection in the bathroom mirror had surprised him. Beneath the weariness and weight loss, he could still recognize himself. The streets were silent as he made his way to Harrison's Bakery, his breath forming clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. He arrived at 4:45 a.m., worried about being late, only to find the lights already on inside. Mr. Harrison was there, flour dusting his apron as he worked at shaping dough. He looked up when the bell jingled and smiled, not seeming at all surprised to see Michael. "You came," he said simply. "Good. There's an apron hanging by the door. Put it on, and I'll show you what needs to be done." The work was physically demanding. Michael's first task was to move heavy sacks of flour from the delivery entrance to the storeroom. Then, Mr. Harrison taught him how to operate the large mixers, explaining each step of the bread-making process with patient detail. "Bread is alive, Mr. Harrison told him as they worked side by side. "The yeast, the fermentation, it's a living thing that needs attention and care. Respect the process, and it will reward you." By 7 a.m., when the bakery opened for its first customers, Michael's muscles ached in ways they hadn't since his factory days, but there was satisfaction in the pain. He had helped create something, dozens of loaves now cooling on racks, their crusts golden and fragrant. That first day stretched into a week, then a month. Michael learned quickly, eager to master every aspect of the bakery. He arrived early and stayed late, saving his wages carefully. Mr. Harrison paid him fairly and never once mentioned the attempted theft that had brought them together. With his first paycheck, Michael secured a bed at a halfway house. With his second, he bought new clothes for job interviews, though increasingly he found himself drawn to the work at the bakery. By his third month, he had saved enough for a security deposit on a small studio apartment, nothing luxurious, but clean, warm, and his. Throughout this time, he continued reading the little book Mr. Harrison had given him, finding new meaning in passages he had already read multiple times. He began attending a small church near his apartment, not because he had all the answers, but because the questions felt important. Chapter 5. Rising Again. 2 years passed. Michael had become Mr. Harrison's right-hand man, managing the bakery when the older man took his rare days off. He had developed his own specialties, a cranberry walnut loaf that customers requested by name and cinnamon rolls that regularly sold out before noon. On a crisp fall morning, Mr. Harrison asked Michael to join him for coffee before the bakery opened. "I have something to discuss with you," he said, his expression serious as he placed 2 mugs on the small table where they'd first shared a meal. Michael's stomach tightened with anxiety. Despite everything, part of him still expected the other shoe to drop, for this miracle of second chances to dissolve. "My doctor says I need to slow down," Mr. Harrison began. "My heart isn't what it used to be, and these 4 a.m. wake-ups aren't helping." He took a sip of his coffee, then looked directly at Michael. "I'd like to offer you partnership in the bakery. Eventually, when I retire, you could take over completely." Michael sat in stunned silence. "Why me?" he finally managed to ask. "You could sell this place for a good price. Enjoy your retirement." Mr. Harrison smiled. "This bakery has never just been about money. It's about community. It's about seeing the good in people that they sometimes can't see in themselves." He reached across the table and tapped Michael's chest gently. "You understand that now? I've watched you slip extra bread to the homeless folks who come to our door. I've seen how you treat every customer with dignity. You've got the heart for this work." Tears pricked at Michael's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes, Mr. Harrison replied, "and then help me figure out how to expand our giving program. I've been thinking we could dedicate 1 day a week to providing free bread to those who need it most." Chapter 6. Giving Back. Michael's idea was simple but revolutionary. Every Sunday, when the bakery would normally be closed, they would open for 3 hours to distribute bread freely to anyone in need. No questions asked, no paperwork required. They called it Sunday Blessings and prepared special loaves just for the occasion, hearty, nutritious bread designed to sustain rather than simply satisfy. Word spread quickly through shelters and community centers, and soon lines formed around the block every Sunday morning. The program grew beyond their expectations. Other local businesses began to contribute. The cheese shop down the street provided samples, the coffee roaster donated hot beverages, and a nearby restaurant occasionally sent over soup. What had started as a simple idea became a weekly community event. Michael never shared his own story with those who came for bread, but he recognized himself in many of their faces, the shame mixed with gratitude, the struggle to accept help, the flicker of hope that perhaps things could change. One Sunday, a year after the program began, a woman approached Michael as he handed out loaves. She had a young daughter in tow, a serious-faced child of about 8. "You probably don't remember me," the woman began hesitantly. Michael looked at her more carefully. There was something familiar about her features. "Sarah?" he asked, hardly believing it. His ex-wife looked both the same and different, thinner perhaps, with new lines around her eyes. She nodded. "I heard about this place, about what you're doing here." She gestured to their daughter. "Emma wanted to see you." The little girl looked up at him with solemn eyes. "Mom says you make the best bread in Philadelphia," she said. Michael knelt down to her level. "I try my best," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Would you like to see how it's made sometime?" Emma nodded shyly. Sarah touched Michael's arm. "We'd like that, both of us." Chapter 7. Full Circle. 5 years after that fateful winter night, Harrison Davis Bakery had become a Philadelphia institution. The partnership had breathed new life into the business, allowing for thoughtful expansion. They now operated 3 locations throughout the city, each committed to the same principles of quality and community. The Sunday Blessings program had evolved into a registered nonprofit organization that provided not just food but job training for those seeking to rebuild their lives. Michael personally mentored formerly homeless individuals, teaching them baking skills and business basics. Mr. Harrison, though semi-retired now, still came in regularly to check on things and offer wisdom. On the 5th anniversary of Michael's first day of work, they sat together in the original bakery, sharing coffee and freshly baked scones. "Did you ever imagine this?" Michael asked, gesturing around them at the thriving business. Mr. Harrison smiled. "I hoped for it. That's why I gave you that book instead of calling the police." "It changed everything for me," Michael admitted. "Not just the job opportunity, but the idea that I could have a purpose even when everything seemed lost." "That's how grace works, Mr. Harrison replied. "It finds us at our lowest and offers not just a handout, but a way forward." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar-looking book, much like the one he had given Michael years ago, though this one was brand new. "I was wondering if you might need this." Michael looked at him questioningly. "For the new apprentice starting tomorrow," Mr. Harrison explained. "The young man from the halfway house. He reminds me of someone I met a few years back." Michael took the book, running his fingers over the embossed title, "The Promises of God." His own copy, now dog-eared and filled with notes, remained his most treasured possession. "I believe it's your turn to pass it on," Mr. Harrison said quietly. Michael nodded, understanding the full circle of grace he was now part of. "I'll tell him my story," he promised. "All of it," Mr. Harrison encouraged. "Even the part about the stolen bread. Especially that part. Sometimes our lowest moments become the foundation for our greatest purpose." As they finished their coffee, the morning light streamed through the bakery windows, illuminating the space where desperation had once driven a hungry man to steal, and where compassion had transformed that act into the beginning of a new story, one of redemption, purpose, and the power of a second chance. Epilogue. Letters of Hope. On the 10th anniversary of Harrison Davis Bakery, they published a small recipe book, with proceeds going to support the Sunday Blessings program. But it wasn't just recipes that filled its pages. Interspersed among instructions for sourdough and cinnamon rolls were letters, dozens of them, from people whose lives had been touched by the bakery and its mission. There were letters from former employees who had gone on to start their own businesses, letters from families who had received bread during difficult times and later returned as customers, letters from community members who had witnessed the transformation of their neighborhood through one small business that cared enough to give back. And at the very beginning of the book, there was a letter from Michael himself, telling the story of a stolen loaf of bread and the unexpected grace that had followed. He wrote of his journey from desperation to purpose, and of the lesson he had learned and continued to share. That sometimes the difference between despair and hope is as simple as one person seeing value in another when they can no longer see it in themselves. The book became an unexpected bestseller, not just locally but nationally, as its message of redemption and second chances resonated far beyond Philadelphia. Requests came in from other cities for guidance in starting similar programs, and Michael found himself traveling occasionally to speak and share what they had learned. Sarah and Emma had become regular parts of his life again, not as a reunited family, too much had changed for all of them, but as dear friends finding a new way to be connected. Emma, now 13, spent weekends at the bakery, showing a natural talent for the artisanal side of bread making. On a winter evening much like the one where his story began, Michael stood at the window of the original bakery, watching snowflakes dance in the golden light spilling onto the sidewalk. Mr. Harrison, now in his 70s but still sharp as ever, joined him. "What are you thinking about?" the older man asked. Michael smiled. "About how places can hold memories, how this spot right here contains both my greatest shame and my greatest redemption." Mr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "That's the beauty of a life redeemed. Nothing is wasted, not even the darkest moments." Outside, a figure huddled in a threadbare coat paused, looking in at the warmth of the bakery, hunger and hesitancy written in their posture. Michael recognized that stance, that moment of desperate decision-making. Without a word, he moved to the door and opened it wide. "Come in," he called out to the stranger. "We were just about to have some soup and bread. There's plenty to share." As the person cautiously stepped inside, Michael felt the weight of the moment, the beautiful symmetry of grace received and grace extended. In his pocket, he carried a fresh copy of the Promises of God and a handwritten letter of his own, ready to continue the chain of hope that had begun with a stolen loaf of bread and a second chance. In that moment, as snow fell softly outside and warmth radiated within, Michael Davis understood that his story was still being written and that perhaps its greatest chapters were still to come.